The driveway was just as long as I remembered, maybe even longer now that I had to walk it alone. The Cade estate hadn't changed in 20 years. Same towering oaks flanking the property. Same ornate black gate with the gold C in the center. Same grim stillness that wrapped around it all like ivy. I paused before knocking, half expecting the front door to swing open with open arms, maybe even a tearful smile. But when it finally creaked open, it was Carolyn. "Hi," I said, managing a hopeful smile. She didn't return it. "You weren't supposed to get here until 3. It was 2:45. She stepped aside with the kind of stiff courtesy you reserve for unwanted guests. "They're in the solarium. Inside, the air smelled like polished wood and dried flowers. Familiar, suffocating. I followed Caroline through the marbled hallway, past the family portraits, none of which had been updated in 2 decades, and into the sun-soaked solarium. "Victoria," my mother said flatly, not turning from her glass of iced tea. My father looked up from his newspaper. "Didn't know you were back stateside. I emailed." "Twice," I said, standing there awkwardly with a canvas duffel bag slung over my shoulder and a small box tucked under my arm. "I brought you both something." My mother finally looked at me. "You shouldn't have." She meant it. I sat down and set the box on the glass table between us. "Just little things from overseas. Tea for you, Mom, and for you, Dad. A tie from the London branch. Thought you might—" "I don't wear ties anymore," he interrupted. "Of course not." I swallowed hard, eyes scanning the room. "Where's my old camera cabinet?" "The teak one." Caroline leaned against the wall, arms crossed. My mother pretended to be fascinated by a spot on her glass. My father took a casual sip of coffee. "Sold it." "What?" "Years ago. Place was collecting dust. That was—" I sat up straighter, trying to keep my voice even. "That was a complete Nikon F-series collection. I built that for 15 years. "You left it here," he said with a shrug. "Didn't look like you were coming back." I couldn't find words. I just nodded and looked down at the gifts they hadn't even unwrapped. Caroline finally spoke. "We had no idea what you'd want with a bunch of old cameras. It's not like you're still into whatever that was." "Photography," I muttered. The silence stretched long and brittle. "So," my mother said lightly, what is it you do again? Computers?" "I work for the Department of Homeland Security," I said, sharper than intended. "Cyber intelligence," my father grunted. "Bet that keeps you real warm at night." "I assumed you'd be glad I came home," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "After all this time," he folded his paper. "Don't mistake silence for invitation, Victoria." There it was. The chill I'd carried with me for 20 years was still alive and well in this house. I stood up and picked up my duffel bag. "Right. I'll find a hotel." Caroline watched me with something that almost looked like pity. I paused at the door. "Next time you sell something that belongs to me, maybe ask." My father didn't even look up. As I walked back down that long driveway, the estate behind me felt like a museum I was no longer allowed to enter. Not a single hug. Not a single welcome home. Just dust where I once lived, and a family that had already buried me. I stayed at the Lakeview Inn, 10 minutes from the estate. Beige walls, floral bedding, and a front desk clerk named Gail, who gave me a discount without asking why my eyes were red. She handed me my key and said, "We don't get many Cades out this way." I didn't correct her. The next morning, I went back. Maybe I was hoping for a better reception, or maybe I just needed closure. Either way, I was sitting stiffly in the Cade living room by 11 a.m., my untouched coffee cooling in my hands. "Caroline's launching her new line in Milan next month," my mother said, with a proud smile. Caroline sat across from me, legs crossed elegantly, sipping from a mug that read, "Boss Babe." "It's just a capsule drop," she said. "But Vogue's already reached out. Dad's friend at the hedge fund said he'd help with promotion." "That's great," I said. "Really?" No one asked what I'd been working on. I glanced around the room, feeling a quiet discomfort settle in. The shelf above the fireplace used to hold a framed photo of me from Quantico. Me in my cadet uniform, smiling like I thought it meant something. Now it was gone, replaced by a glossy portrait of Caroline shaking hands with someone vaguely European. I stood and wandered toward the hallway, curious, maybe foolishly hopeful. Eventually I found it, my photo, half hidden behind a dusty vase on the back bookshelf. The frame was chipped. The glass cracked. "Thought we donated most of those old things," my mother said from behind me. I guess you missed this one. She didn't respond. I turned slowly. Do you remember the fire in Sacramento? The one in 2017? Caroline blinked. The one with what was it, a gas leak? No, I said, setting the photo down. It was a cyber attack. We intercepted it. I led the team that contained it before it reached the grid. Caroline's lips parted like she wanted to sound impressed, but she didn't speak. My father walked in then, adjusting his cufflinks. You still going on about your little hacker squad? It's a federal division, I said, sharper than I meant. And I wasn't going on, he cut me off. I read about that. Something like 30 agents working remotely, probably more bureaucratic chaos than real work. My mother gave a polite laugh. Honestly, Victoria, all that tech stuff just feels so intangible. Yeah, Caroline chimed in. No offense, but you've always been kind of abstract. It's hard to explain what you do to anyone. I stared at them, stunned. I've sent money for the house repairs. When Mom's card got hacked. When Uncle David got arrested and you couldn't make bail. Oh, sweetie, my mother said, waving a hand. We appreciate that, of course, but it wasn't much. It was over $12,000. My father sat down and looked me dead in the eye. Let's be honest. You chose government work. You chose distance. Don't act like we abandoned you. You left. I clutched my bag tighter. You could have written, I whispered. You could have stayed, he said flatly. I didn't cry, not in front of them. I just nodded once and walked out. They'd erased me from their story so completely. I almost believed I'd never been in it. The government housing unit was tucked behind a row of abandoned strip malls just outside Albany. From the outside, it looked like a faded retirement home, the kind with cracked stucco and uneven sidewalks. But it was safe and quiet. That was enough. I checked in using my old credentials, still valid, though barely. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with an NSA badge and a paperback thriller on her desk, nodded once and handed me my keycard. Unit 2B, weekly refreshes on Mondays. Don't drink the tap water. The room had a twin bed, a desk, and a narrow window facing a dumpster. I dropped my duffel on the floor and sat at the desk, staring at the government-issued notepad like I might find purpose in its lined pages. An hour later, someone knocked. I opened the door to find Drew Camden leaning on the frame like he lived there. He hadn't changed. Same crooked grin, same tired eyes that still saw everything. Well, look who finally resurfaced, he said, stepping inside without asking. I blinked, half smiling. Camden, you're still alive? Barely. You trying to join the graveyard shift with the rest of us, Cade? I gestured to the peeling walls. Seems like the place for it. He looked around. Still better than our Berlin drop. Remember that one? The one with the mattress full of bedbugs, or the one with the exploding radiator? He laughed. Both. Same night, if I remember right. I hadn't seen Drew in 4 years. He used to run point for field logistics. After a mission in Ankara went sideways. He took a sabbatical and never really came back. Now he did consulting, unofficially. You settling in, he asked, eyeing my untouched suitcase. Not really. He sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled out a brown envelope. I shouldn't show you this. It's not public. Yet. He slid the contents onto the desk. I glanced down, some kind of national address outline, seal of the president stamped at the top. I raised an eyebrow. This is above our clearance. Not for long, he said. There's a segment in the works. A recognition broadcast. Civilian defense honors. I'm not a civilian, I said automatically. I'm government. Not anymore, he reminded me. You're off the payroll. You're one of the ghosts now, which is exactly why you're on the short list. I looked at him, stunned. For what? Drew leaned back, folding his arms. Unsung service in critical infrastructure defense. Global scale, I scoffed. You're joking. I never joke about presidential broadcasts, especially ones that go live during a CNN primetime slot. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. My ops were sealed. He tilted his head. Not all of them. Someone in D.C. wants to make an example. A good one. Quiet heroism. You're it. I wanted to laugh. I didn't. You think a 10-second mention on national TV changes anything? He shrugged. Probably not. But maybe it reminds people you were never invisible, even if your family acted like you were. That landed harder than I expected. I don't want the attention, I said. You might get it anyway, he replied, standing. Question is, what are you going to do with it? He left without another word. I sat there a long time, staring at the folder. Maybe I didn't need them to remember me. Maybe the world would do it for them. The message came through at 6:04 a.m., encrypted and signed by Homeland Security. Short and sterile, like all the important ones. You are scheduled for recognition during the National Civilian Defense broadcast. Please confirm acknowledgement and media silence clause. I stared at the screen for a full minute before tapping reply. Acknowledged. No fanfare, no confetti. Just the U.S. government's version of a thank you note, carved in code. Outside, the street lamp buzzed over the empty lot behind the housing unit. The sun hadn't even risen yet. I made myself a cup of government coffee, burnt, bitter, nearly brown, and sat on the twin bed with the laptop open. CNN was running its usual morning coverage. Campaign updates, weather disasters, market swings. Then came the teaser. A sharp-dressed anchor leaned toward the camera. Tonight, during a special presidential address, we're told to expect a rare civilian recognition. Someone instrumental in protecting the nation from a near-catastrophic cyber attack. They cut to footage of blinking servers and darkened power grids. I didn't flinch. Across town, in the Cade family's living room, immaculate, frost-white, magazine-perfect. I could picture my mother sipping tea. My father probably in his usual chair, squinting at the TV. Caroline scrolling through her phone, half listening. They wouldn't connect the dots. They'd hear the teaser, maybe make a passing remark. Another tech thing, my father might say. Caroline would shrug. Probably one of those TikTok encryption kids. My mother, maybe, would whisper, "Doesn't Victoria work in this kind of thing?" And then forget it before the commercial break. The thought didn't sting like I expected. In fact, it felt quiet, peaceful. Later that evening, I walked to the bench behind the housing unit. No one else was out there, just cracked pavement, overgrown grass, and the hum of distant traffic. I sat with my jacket pulled tight, the air crisp against my face. No cameras, no lights, no applause. And somehow, it felt better than any welcome home ever could. Inside, my phone buzzed. "Drew, you watching this from your command center?" I typed back, watching it from a bench with a broken trash can beside me. He replied, "Very on brand." I smiled. I used to think validation had to come from family, that it had to be personal to matter. But sometimes, when the world sees what your own blood refuses to, that's enough. No ceremony, no family dinner, just a whisper across the nation. She mattered. And I didn't need their permission to believe it. The National Civilian Defense Ceremony aired at exactly 8 p.m. Eastern. It opened with the president's voice, measured, calm, carefully emotional in that way only years of training and speechwriters could achieve. In the face of invisible enemies, he said, "It is often the quietest among us who do the most. Tonight we recognize those whose work saved millions, not through headlines, but through silence." I watched from my room in the housing unit, the signal glitching every few seconds. The live feed wasn't HD. I didn't care. He paused, then said it. "Our first honoree, Victoria Cade." There was a beat of silence before applause erupted from the live audience at the Capitol Rotunda. I sat perfectly still, watching my name scroll across the bottom of the screen like it belonged there. The president continued, "Miss Cade, formerly a senior federal cyber analyst with the Department of Homeland Security, led a covert task force that intercepted and neutralized a global ransomware attack targeting over 70% of our national infrastructure. Electrical grids, hospital systems, financial networks. She stopped them. I barely heard the rest. Inside that marble room in D.C., dignitaries were standing, clapping. Somewhere in the second row, I caught a glimpse of Drew. He wasn't supposed to be there. Must have pulled some strings. He looked directly into the camera and gave the faintest nod. But the real moment, the one that truly mattered, was happening elsewhere. Back in Albany, in a pristine living room where everything matched, Senator Marshall Cade had frozen in his chair. My mother, hand hovering over her teacup, stared blankly at the screen. Caroline stood beside the fireplace, the remote clutched tight in her hand like she could pause the truth if she pressed hard enough. The camera panned across the Capitol crowd. More applause, standing ovation. They didn't show my face. There wasn't one to show, no video, no photo. Just my name and a citation read aloud by the leader of the free world. And still, my family couldn't look away. I imagined the thoughts racing through their minds. Wait, our Victoria? She led that. How did we not know? Because they never asked. Because every version of me that didn't fit their mold had been erased, minimized, or stored in the attic like an old souvenir they couldn't quite bring themselves to throw out. The broadcast lasted 40 minutes. I only watched the first 10. After my segment ended, I muted the stream, closed the laptop, and stepped outside. The night air was cool, laced with the smell of rain and concrete. I stood under the broken street lamp, listening to the muffled cheers echoing from someone else's unit down the hall. No one from the Cade family called. No texts, no stunned messages of apology. They were probably still too shocked, or too proud to dial my number. Good. The applause had ended. But inside me, something far deeper had begun. A quiet, steady realization that I didn't need them to clap. I didn't need them to understand or even approve. The country had seen me, and finally, I saw myself. By morning, my inbox had over 900 unread messages. Some were from news outlets. Others came from old colleagues, strangers in cybersecurity circles, even high school classmates I hadn't heard from since AOL away messages were a thing. Subject lines blurred together. Cyber hero Victoria Cade. We'd love your quote on national resiliency. Can we schedule a podcast interview? You're an inspiration. Please speak to our Women in Tech group. The country had finally found me. But I didn't answer any of them. I sat at the tiny desk in my housing unit, staring at the flood of attention. It didn't feel like vindication. It felt like noise. The only message that gave me pause came from a private account. MarshallCade@Senate.gov. Subject: Let's talk. No greeting, no apology. Just, proud of what you did. Would like to reconnect. We'll be in DC next week. Call me. Right after it. One from Caroline. Wow, Vic. Just saw the broadcast. You should have told us. Let's talk soon. Amazing work. I stared at those two messages for a long time. Then I deleted both. I didn't need their retroactive praise. Drew showed up later that day with takeout and his usual crooked smile. They offering you a statue yet? Just a speaking slot on a tech podcast called Firewall Friends. He winced. Hard pass. We sat on the edge of my bed with boxes of curry between us. Outside, rain hit the windows in soft, rhythmic taps. Drew glanced at me mid-chew. You gonna talk to the press? I shook my head. No upside. You sure? You could rewrite your whole story. Set the record straight. I'd rather protect it. He nodded slowly, chewing. That's the difference between you and the rest of us. You don't want revenge. You want peace. I didn't respond. Because he was right. A younger version of me might have posted a family-wide group text. Turns out the abstract daughter saved the country. But I didn't need to anymore. Not answering them was louder than anything I could say. Later, alone, I scrolled through a few messages from strangers. One stood out, from a girl in Kansas, barely 20, just hired into a federal IT program. She wrote, I saw you on the broadcast. I didn't even know women did work like that. Now I want to. That, I replied to. Just one sentence. Keep going, they'll never see you coming. Then I shut my laptop and went to sleep with a calm I hadn't felt in years. I didn't need to be loud. I just needed to be clear. She found me at a small cafe off Route 9, the kind of place with dusty curtains and a handwritten menu on the wall. I was halfway through a cold cup of tea when the door creaked open and Caroline stepped inside. No makeup, no heels, no perfect waves in her hair, just jeans, a sweatshirt, and a look in her eyes I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. I didn't stand. I didn't wave her over. She saw me and made the decision herself. She slid into the seat across from me. Hey, she said quietly. I took a sip of tea. Did you come here for a photo op? Her mouth twitched, like she expected that. No press, no followers, just me. I waited. She glanced around the cafe like she was seeing it through my eyes. Or maybe hers. I used to think these places were sad. You know, places for people who didn't have somewhere else to be. And now? They feel honest, she said. Not curated, not dressed up. I didn't respond. She folded her hands, looked down. I didn't know they were going to say your name. That's the part that bothered you? The name? No, she said quickly. I mean, I didn't know what you were actually doing all those years. You never asked. Her eyes met mine. She didn't argue. I didn't think it mattered, she admitted. What you were doing, where you were, I thought. The distance was your choice. It was survival, I said flatly. Caroline's jaw tightened. I need to say something, and I need you to hear it all the way through. I didn't nod, but I stayed. She took a breath. We needed you to stay invisible. That's the truth. You were always sharper, more intense. Dad hated that. Mom didn't understand it. And She looked at her hands. I resented you for leaving because it made me realize how much I stayed. She looked up. I shut you out. I went along with it because it was easier. Because guilt is easier to ignore when the person it belongs to is far away. That landed like a slow punch. Caroline swallowed hard. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just didn't want you to think. We forgot you. We just didn't know how to face what we did. I sat in silence, letting the weight of her words settle. After a moment, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a photograph, one of the few I'd saved. Us, at the lake house, barefoot, sunburned, maybe 9 and 11, before everything got too complicated. I slid it across the table. She stared at it, eyes glistening. I don't know what you're expecting, I said. I don't either, she whispered. I just wanted to try. I stood, zipping my coat. I'm not walking backward, Carolyn, she nodded. I know. I walked out, leaving the photo in her trembling hands. Some things can't be repaired, but they can be remembered. He was waiting at the gates of the agency compound like it was a formality. Like this was a visit, not a plea. Gray suit, polished shoes. American flag pin just slightly off-center. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just stopped shrinking to fit his expectations. Victoria, he said, nodding. Senator, I replied, matching his tone. His jaw clenched for a second before he gestured toward the parking lot. Walk with me? I considered saying no, but I walked. We circled the outer edge of the compound, where the trees grew in crooked lines and the sidewalk cracked from frost. He kept his hands in his pockets like he didn't trust what they'd do if left free. I saw the broadcast, he said finally. I figured. I didn't expect that level of recognition. I smiled without warmth. You didn't expect me to matter. He flinched, barely, but didn't argue. We walked in silence for a moment. Then he stopped near the bench by the perimeter fence. I want to be honest with you, he said. For once. I folded my arms. That would be a first. He looked out toward the trees, not at me. When you left, I thought you'd come back, eventually. On your knees, maybe. Tired of the world, needing us. Needing you, he nodded. Yes, me. And when I didn't, I got angry, he admitted. And then I convinced myself it was your pride. That you thought you were better than us. Than me. And now? He turned to me, and for the first time in maybe 2 decades, I saw something unfamiliar in his expression. Doubt. Now I see that it wasn't pride, it was strength. You built something. Quietly. Without us. You erased me, I said. He didn't deny it. I didn't want to believe I could be wrong about my own daughter, he said. But I was. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a letter. I wrote this before the ceremony. I didn't send it. Figured I'd read it if I saw you. I didn't take it. I don't need a letter, I said. I needed a father. 20 years ago. I know. We stood there a moment, surrounded by the sound of rustling leaves and distant highway traffic. I want to fix this, he said. Or at least start. I shook my head. You're starting from the wrong place. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I'm not starting where I used to. I'm not looking for approval anymore. Not from you. Not from anyone who needed me to be small to love me. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. I stepped back toward the gate. You don't get to decide how I heal, I said. He nodded once, slowly. Then, I hope you do. I already am. And I walked away without looking back. The Global Ethics and Defense Summit was held in a mirrored glass building in Arlington, the kind where every hallway had a security checkpoint and the bottled water came with an embossed seal. I was the closing keynote. The stage was small, the lights were bright, and the room was packed. Government officials, defense contractors, cyber consultants, students. Half the audience knew exactly who I was. The other half had only heard about me in the last 3 days. I stood behind the podium in a navy blazer, no makeup, hair tied back. Not polished, not curated, just me. I cleared my throat. My name is Victoria Cade. No applause yet. That would come later. I've spent 20 years behind firewalls, digital and otherwise. My job was to stop the threats you never saw. Sometimes I did that in an office, sometimes in a hotel lobby, sometimes from a trailer behind a consulate in 90-degree heat with no air conditioning. Scattered laughter, the nervous kind. I've intercepted ransomware targeting hospitals. I've shut down dark web marketplaces that sold government access like candy. I've had weeks where I slept 3 hours a night and months where no one remembered I existed at all. The room got quiet again. You know what no one tells you about protecting your country? That sometimes the hardest part isn't the threats, it's the erasure. I let that hang for a second. There's a cost to being invisible. When you do your job well, nothing happens. No headlines, no interviews, no parades. A pause. But worse than that, sometimes your own family doesn't understand the value of silence. Sometimes they treat you like a ghost, even when you're alive and fighting. Now it was silent. No fidgeting, no coughs, just stillness. I'm not here for revenge or even recognition. I'm here because I want every woman, every analyst, every underpaid federal contractor working nights in a basement office to know this. Your work matters, even when no one claps, even when your name is never said out loud. I looked up, scanning the rows of faces. Family doesn't mean who raised you. It means who respects you. That line hit the room like a wave. I saw someone in the third row wipe their eyes. Someone else sat straighter, chin lifted. I smiled, just slightly. You don't have to shrink to make others comfortable. And if they need you to disappear to feel powerful, that's not family. That's control. Now the applause came. Slow at first, then rising, strong, sustained. People stood. Some nodded. Some cried. I let them clap. I didn't bow. I didn't wave. I just stood still and let the sound wash over me. Later, backstage, Drew found me with a water bottle and a proud grin. You're going to be quoted in 10 different languages by tomorrow. Then I hope they spell my name right, he laughed. You didn't burn them. You didn't even name them. That's restraint. It's not restraint, I said. It's clarity. He nodded slowly. Hell of a legacy you're building. I didn't reply. Because for the first time, it didn't matter who heard me. What mattered was that I'd spoken. The lakeside cabin sat just outside Shroon Lake, tucked beneath a mess of pine trees and quiet air. No fences, no spotlights, just water, wind, and peace. I'd bought it 2 months after the broadcast, not on impulse, on instinct. It wasn't flashy, 2 bedrooms, wood stove, porch swing that creaked in the breeze, but it was mine. Every nail, every creaky step, every patch of chipped paint was mine, and it was far, far away from the estate. Inside, I kept things minimal. Maps on the walls, a photo of my old unit, faces mostly classified, but I knew each one by heart. A copy of the presidential transcript folded into a file, mostly forgotten in a drawer. The one thing I kept out in the open was a bracelet. Worn leather, faded metal tag with a serial number barely visible. It was given to me by a fellow agent during a blackout op in Jordan. She didn't make it home. I wore it every mission after that. Now, it was ready to be passed on. Alina arrived just before sunset. She stepped out of the black car with cautious steps, cradling a laptop bag and looking up at the cabin like it might swallow her whole. Her hair was in a tight bun, glasses slipping down her nose. She couldn't have been older than 24. I met her on the porch. Director Cade, she said, nervous and formal. Just Victoria, I replied. Come in. You hungry? She nodded, awkward smile forming. A little. Over soup and grilled cheese, my version of a welcome banquet, she told me about her first month in the National Civilian Defense Bureau. They keep forgetting I'm in the room, she said, with a dry laugh, until they need something decrypted. I knew that feeling well. They'll remember, I said. You just have to give them a reason. Later, I handed her the bracelet. She looked at it like it was fragile. It's not for decoration, I said. It's for days you feel erased, you put it on and you remember you're seen. Even when no one says it. Alina's voice was soft. Why me? I smiled. Because I see you. She nodded, tucking it into her pocket like it was made of gold. After she left, I sat on the porch and watched the sky turn lavender. Another letter arrived that week. My father's handwriting, scrawled across a cream envelope with no return address. Inside, no apology. Just a clipped note about seeing me on CSPAN again. A comment about family ties that still matter. I lit the fireplace, opened the stove door, and fed the letter into the flames. It curled and vanished. That night, I opened a new journal and wrote, "They never saw me, not really, but now the whole world does. And more importantly, I do." I capped the pen, set the book beside the window, and turned off the light. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept like someone who had come home. Because I had. Finally, on my own terms.